listening to Cam Redden on 2SSR.
Yeah, that's right. Great to have your company on this Friday afternoon. 4:30 on the dot. We'll check your traffic in a moment's time. It's not looking too bad out the window at the moment, but I tell you what, it looks like we are in for a hammering this weekend. We'll have a few more details on that coming up a little later in the show. I did mention earlier on, I've been away for the last week or so. It's been intensive exams at uni. I'm in my final year there. I'll touch wood, hoping I pass everything. But it is that time of the year and you can get a little bit lost. But one thing I have been doing to try and escape from the day-to-day grind of staring at books all day is I've been watching the Euro. Now, it's kind of like a World Cup light. It's soccer, it's football, it's over in Europe, being held in France at the moment. And what it is some of the best European countries that come together and just... It seems almost like at times a friendly tournament because you would think there are really only 3 or 4 that are actually a real shot at winning, but it's actually been really quite interesting. And a lot has been made of the Euro this year, perhaps more than in previous years, particularly in the last couple of days. And again, unfortunately, much of the focus has been for the action off the field and not the action on it. Going off some of the footage that I've seen in the news over the last couple of days, outside some of the stadiums in France where the tournament's being held, some of these shots look more like a war zone than an international football tournament. It's already been a week marred by violence, particularly the worst offenders being British and Russian fans. France has really had a rough time over the last 18 months, and you would think that the sort of images being shown across the world, coming out of what's meant to be a fun and happy, exciting tournament, really, these are some of the last things that, let alone the French people, but the rest of the world would want to be seeing coming out of what I would say is quite possibly the most beautiful city in the world. Well, if ever the tournament needed a bit of an image clean-up, I think now is a pretty appropriate time. And amongst all the violence and flares and the arrests that have been going on over there, some footage has found its way online over the last day or so of fans outside a game between Ireland and Sweden. 2 teams that aren't anywhere near favourites to win the thing, but they're in it. They're certainly not just making up the numbers, they're giving it a crack. Fans from both sides were standing around outside the stadium where the game was about to be played. There are around 30-odd in this bit of footage. These guys weren't throwing punches. They weren't throwing bricks. They weren't lighting flares. They were singing ABBA.
You can dance, you can dance, having the time of your life. Oh, see that girl, watch that scene, in
Now, I will say that's probably the only time that you're ever going to hear any stretch of ABBA on this show, and I do have to question their taste in music, but it does highlight something that I've never really fully understood about football, particularly overseas, which is why and how that sort of fan violence we've seen over the last few days makes its way into something as joyful and as fun as something like sport. The sort of things that you've seen on the news the last couple of days, that doesn't qualify as passion to me. What you just heard, a couple of guys from opposing teams, opposing nations, who are having a real crack at it on the field just a couple of minutes before or after, actually enjoying themselves and making a day of it that way, making good memories that way, rather than getting their faces on the news for other reasons. Those sort of things are just ugly, if you ask me, and it takes all the focus off the sport onto the people in the stands, and that's not what sport is all about. That's not what it's there for. From what I've seen, the on-field stuff has been really, really good in the Euros this year. But that, unfortunately, tends to get forgotten about when we've got all of this stuff going on outside. Not the good stuff. See, if you have the good things, they might take up a couple of seconds in the news clip of people celebrating a win or commemorating a loss or whatever it is. But if you've got the bad stuff, unfortunately, that tends to become a story in and of itself. For the record, that game between Ireland and Sweden did end up as a draw. And given the role that ABBA has played in this, I never thought I'd say this, but maybe it is time I finally gave Eurovision a little bit of credit for the good in the world after all.
Cam Redden, and this is your homecoming on 2SSR FM.